Imagine being an orphan struggling with life and then getting kidnapped at the age of 7. You would think, what could be worse? But that was just the beginning. The ones who kidnapped you were mad scientists who experimented on you, implanting minerals from the gate and monster cells inside you, slowly turning you into a chimera hunter. They forced you to fight monsters for 70 years, and when your body started to fall apart, they abandoned you in a dungeon to die. But little did they know, they had also implanted the power of an immortal monster within you. That power revived you, and turned you human again. Well, this is the tragic story of our main character, who now stands at a crossroads with two paths ahead, one of revenge, and the other of forgetting everything to live a normal life in the dungeon. If you guys think this story is good, then make sure to like and subscribe this channel. Then let's start. One day, a sudden tear appeared in the sky, forming a blazing red cross-shaped rift. Its edges crackled with energy, radiating an ominous glow as if the heavens themselves had been split apart. On that fateful day, everything began to change. From the ominous rift in the sky, a gate tore open, flooding the world with chaos. Swarms of monstrous insect-like creatures poured out, their wings beating furiously as they descended upon the earth. And with their arrival, destruction followed. From beyond the rift emerged a world that would later be known as the Demon Realm. From its depths, ferocious and merciless monsters poured into the human world, their presence bringing chaos and ruin wherever they went. In humanity's darkest hour, certain individuals awakened with extraordinary abilities. These chosen ones, known as hunters, rose to stand against the monstrous threat, wielding powers that defied ordinary limits. These hunters were individuals who had awakened to the power of mana, granting them extraordinary abilities that set them apart from ordinary humans. With the emergence of these empowered individuals, humanity finally found the strength to fight back, launching a counterattack against the monstrous invaders. As the years went by, the scars of war slowly began to fade. Cities rose once more from the rubble, rebuilt under the warm glow of a new dawn. Though countless challenges still lingered, life gradually found its rhythm again. At the very least, some people were able to reclaim and enjoy a semblance of normalcy. Peace was fragile. The threat was never truly gone, as monstrous creatures continued to emerge, forcing humanity to remain vigilant and ready for battle. To combat the relentless waves of monsters pouring into the world, warriors fought fiercely, determined to hold the line and protect humanity from annihilation. With a fierce cry, the warrior swung his weapon, striking at the monstrous abomination before him, its gaping maw lined with jagged fangs and filled with unblinking eyes. Every blow was a desperate attempt to keep the horrors at bay. Despite their bravery, there was a critical problem. The number of hunters who naturally awakened their powers was far too few to match the overwhelming tide of monsters. Thus, in response to this dire shortage, something new was created, a force born out of necessity, to stand against the relentless threat. It was none other than artificial life, beings created by human hands, their glowing eyes and formidable presence signaling a new weapon in the fight for survival. This creation was known as the Chimera Hunter, a powerful artificial warrior, forged to annihilate monsters with unmatched precision and devastating force. The experiments utilized grim materials, corpses of death row inmates and animals, serving as the foundation for creating these artificial warriors. They also incorporated rare minerals harvested from deep within the gates, their otherworldly energy serving as a vital component in the creation process. Monster cells were added to the mix, infusing the creations with the power and ferocity of the very beasts they were designed to hunt. In a desperate bid for survival, humanity pushed the limits of science and morality, fusing the remains of beasts and humans within ominous laboratories to forge weapons capable of turning the tide. These advancements made it possible to mass-produce chimera hunters, ensuring a steady army of artificial warriors to confront the monstrous threat. This alliance was hailed as the perfect fusion of the scientific and hunter communities, combining intellect and combat prowess to create humanity's ultimate line of defense. This collaboration significantly reduced hunter mortality rates and saved countless lives, marking a turning point in humanity's battle for survival. Decades later, under the quiet of night, an illegal chimera research lab operated in secrecy. Inside, a weary worker sighed, muttering to himself that he only had one last subject to check before he could finally head home. In the B-18 high-grade chimera storage, two researchers moved cautiously down the dimly lit corridor. One of them stopped, shining his flashlight on a particular cell, number 17. His arm looks a little rotten, he remarked with concern. One researcher shouted urgently, "Hey, don't go near him." The other, unfazed, replied calmly, "It's fine. His brain is damaged. He won't move without orders. A monstrous creature was chained to the ground, its body twisted and unnatural. Its right arm was grotesquely deformed, oozing with strange growths. One of the researchers shined a light on it and said, "His right arm is completely messed up. Could this be a side effect of the experiment?" One of the researchers scoffed and said, "Why are you so scared of a guy who can't even see properly?" But as he spoke, the creature's golden, slit-pupiled eyes suddenly snapped open. One of the researchers stammered, "Let's just roughly pass it. At this rate, he'll be discarded anyway." The other gave a casual nod and replied, "All right, man." The chained creature sat silently in the dimly lit cell, its piercing eyes locked on the two researchers. Neither spoke, the heavy atmosphere pressing down on them as the sound of chains subtly echoed in the air. Inside the lab director's office, a cold and detached voice declared, "Number 17 is now useless," sealing the creature's fate without a hint of remorse. One of the scientists reported, "His body is too badly damaged. If it were any other one, it would have died already." The lab director, seated behind his desk, responded coldly, "How much longer does it have?" One of the scientists replied, "A month at most." The other nodded in agreement, adding, "I agree." The man smirked slightly and said, "Deploy him in this gate blockade operation. Have him guard the rear when the hunters retreat." Under the dim, cold light, the chained beast lay battered and bloodied. Directors commanded researchers to do not input a return command. Far away, in the scorching skies of the Demon Realm's Rocky Mountain region, the ground cracked beneath a lone figure. Golden streaks of power burst through the air. From the red sky above, a massive golden-scaled beast dove with its jaws wide open, teeth glinting menacingly. Its roar shook the heavens as it descended upon the horned figure below. Number 17 braced himself, his clawed legs digging into the ground as golden energy swirled around him. Blood ran down his back, but his eyes were fierce. The golden beast lunged, but Number 17 swung his massive claw and ripped it apart in midair. Suddenly, the ground around him shattered violently as fiery projectiles rained down. Explosions filled the battlefield with smoke and fire, but Number 17 stood tall, his eyes fixed ahead. From the cracked earth, a monstrous plant-like beast erupted, roaring as venomous vines whipped outward. The ground shook, but the white-haired Number 17 didn't flinch. His massive clawed limbs crushed the earth as his glowing eyes radiated killing intent. With a burst of power, he launched into the sky, leaving a blazing trail behind him. The plant beast recoiled in fear, but it was too late. Mid-air, Number 17 twisted and struck, his claws slicing the monster apart, chunks of red flesh raining down across the battlefield. Explosions shook the battlefield, debris flying everywhere. Number 17 opened its jaws wide, rows of sharp teeth gleaming as blue lightning sparked around them. In its mouth, a glowing sphere of energy formed, building up for a deadly attack. A flash of blue lightning blasted from its maw, shooting down like a spear of pure destruction. The beam struck its target directly, scorching everything in its way. The creature was swallowed in the blinding light, its body convulsing as it let out a terrible scream. Sparks crackled across its frame until it looked ready to tear apart from the inside. The battlefield lay in ruin, streaks of lightning still crackling in the air as the dust settled. The group stared at the lone figure ahead, their gazes filled with awe. "Amazing," one of them breathed, unable to hide their astonishment. "To annihilate so many monsters with a single attack," another remarked, his voice tinged with respect. As expected of an S-class chimera hunter, the man glanced at the swirling fiery portal in the distance, his expression tense. "By the way, there's no sign of the gate closing. It's the third day," he said gravely. But then, another guy in a calmer tone told him to don't worry too much, saying, "No matter how many monsters pour out, as long as we have that S-class chimera, we can hold out indefinitely," he declared confidently. But as he spoke, a towering mass of monsters surged upward like a dark tidal wave, racing toward Number 17 standing defiantly at the peak. That man gripped his weapon tightly, the steel gleaming under the ominous crimson sky. "We just have to," he muttered, bracing himself for what was to come. "We just have to," he said, before swinging his blade in a swift, deadly arc. Green blood splattered as the monster was cleaved apart. "Deal with the stragglers that get through." The gate pulsed ominously, its swirling darkness framed by a blazing crimson glow. An unsettling hum filled the air, as if the portal itself was alive and waiting to unleash what lay beyond. A voice rang out urgently. "Red gate disappearance signal confirmed." The tension in the air thickened as the man in the long coat tightened his grip on his weapon. His eyes locked forward. "It's here," he said, his tone calm yet edged with anticipation, as the last remnants of slain monsters littered the ground around them. "All right, retreat. Everyone, exit through the gate." The order rang out with urgency as boots pounded against the ground, their wearers sprinting toward safety before the portal closed. A clenched fist smashed forward with explosive force, the impact shattering the surface it struck as shockwaves rippled outward. Number 17 continued fighting. A massive red and blue creature attacked fiercely, its claws striking down at number 17 on the ground. Two hunters sprinted away from the scene. One of them, a red-haired woman, called out, "Wait, aren't we taking that number 17? The dark-haired man beside her replied without slowing down, "They said not to retrieve him." The red-haired woman questioned in disbelief, "Isn't that expensive?" Meanwhile, number 17 with piercing yellow eyes struggled under the crushing grip of the massive red and blue claw. "They said its lifespan was over anyway," the man's detached voice replied. As they sprinted toward the gate, the red-haired woman's voice wavered with guilt. "I feel kinda bad. If it weren't for him, the damage would have been immense this time." The dark-haired man shot her a sidelong glance and replied bluntly, "Why worry unnecessarily? You know those guys are practically inorganic." His words were cold, stripping away any sense of individuality. Number 17 was trapped in a crushing grip, blood dripping where the claws dug into its flesh. The enemy's hold was unyielding, as if determined to never let it go. But with one brutal strike, number 17 tore the limb free, spraying white fluid across the air. The blood-soaked figure, hair whipping wildly, stood tall despite the chaos. In the silence that followed, only one truth rang in number 17's mind: they're monsters. The mission was simple: protect the hunter's rear at all costs. The battle raged on. Number 17 tore through enemies, severed limbs flying across the ground. It stood firm, holding the line so others could move forward safely. A monstrous jaw lunged toward it, glowing eyes filled with hunger. But before it could bite down, blue lightning crackled through the darkness. Power surged from number 17, a sphere of energy blazing in its grasp. Its golden eye gleamed fiercely under its horned crown, as it unleashed a colossal blast of blue and white energy. The ground split open, debris flying high as the destructive beam ripped everything in its path apart. Even as smoke and lightning filled the battlefield, a calm voice echoed in its mind. "Do you understand?" Wrapped in a green poisonous mist, number 17 staggered forward, bleeding heavily. Blood dripped from its jagged teeth, its claws still raised, refusing to surrender. Through the haze, the words pulsed in its head: "There is nothing else. When the mission ends, you don't return." The comms crackled with number 17's cold report: "Retreat route secured." Its severed claw fell heavily to the ground, lifeless. The mission was complete. Around it, the battlefield was covered in green monster blood, bodies piled in broken heaps. At the center, number 17 lay battered and dying, while the remains of a severed claw rested beside him. With massive, slime-covered number 17 loomed in the light, its jagged teeth bared as thick green fluid dripped from its body. In his mind, a voice instructed him that return is not permitted. On this day, the final mission report for Chimera Hunter number 17, who met its demise, was recorded as follows: number of hunter deaths, 0. The battlefield was littered with the corpses of countless monsters, their twisted forms sprawled in heaps across the cracked earth. In the foreground, the massive segmented body of a slain creature lay still, green blood pooling beneath it. At the center of the carnage, a lone figure remained motionless, surrounded by the remnants of the brutal fight. The once towering threat had been eradicated, leaving only silence in its wake. Total number of monsters subjugated, 1,823. The staggering count was a testament to the scale of the battle. One hunter against an overwhelming tide of monstrosities, leaving behind nothing but carnage. At the moment of death, in number 17's mind, fragments of an unrecorded past began to surface. It recalled that it had once been a complete human, and that it was kidnapped at the age of 9. Starting from that memory, a panorama of number 17's life began to flash before its eyes. Unfortunately, number 17's damaged brain couldn't fully comprehend the meaning behind those scenes. It calmly watched its past life unfold. 79 years ago, at the District 13 orphanage, a man stood outside holding a baby. Looking down at the child, he read softly, "The child's name is..." 70 years ago, a boy sat silently on a chair, his head lowered. A man stood before him, scolding, "You hit a friend with a stone because they teased you a bit? How many times has this happened now?" The boy remained wordless. Snow fell quietly outside as the doors slammed shut with a loud bang. "We can't keep you anymore." With those words echoing in his mind, the boy stepped out into the falling snow, arms crossed against the cold, leaving the orphanage behind. The boy collapsed face first into the snow, his breath visible in the cold air. a looming shadow stretched over him, hinting at someone, or something, approaching. One of the men scoffed, remarking on how, in the slums, children could be found rolling around in the snow. Another voice followed, cold and transactional, asking, "How much is all this?" Strapped to a cold metal table, the boy lay motionless, his limbs bound by restraints and electrodes fixed to his skin. His mouth was gagged, preventing any cry for help. A gloved hand loomed over him, holding a syringe filled with a mysterious purple liquid. From somewhere in the room, a voice questioned with chilling detachment, "Is it a new experimental subject?" In a dimly lit laboratory, several scientists stood around the restrained boy, discussing his identity with clinical detachment. "What number?" one asked. "It's number 17, another replied without hesitation. A quiet observation followed, laced with grim certainty. Spells must have been cast to ensure there was no chance of escape. One of the masked scientists gave a curt order. "Okay, record it." Another, holding a clipboard, noted in a clinical tone, "Number 17. S plus class silkworm larva cell injection." Number 17's restrained hand twitched violently, the black tattoo stark against his pale skin. One of the observers spoke with clinical anticipation. "Let's watch now. What kind of reaction will appear?" One of the researchers stared at the readings in disbelief. "No side effects." Another observed the restrained boy in the chair and added, "A special ability has appeared, but his human form and ego are maintained." One of the researchers examined the data carefully and remarked, "It seems to have a unique constitution." Another, with a cold and clinical tone, ordered, "Keep implanting various things until there's a reaction." The group of scientists huddled closely together under the harsh white light, their lab coats forming a wall of secrecy. Whatever they were observing seemed to demand their full attention, the air in the dimly lit lab thick with tension. Then 64 years ago, in the midst of a crumbling room, number 17 stood firm, energy radiating in a brilliant blue sphere between his hands. The ground beneath him cracked from the force, while behind him, two figures struggled, one coughing on the floor, and another cowering in fear. In front of him, a beast with golden fur and a spiked crest loomed, the tension between them crackling in the air. A massive, horned insect-like creature with a yellow and black armored body charged forward at full speed. Its jagged jaws were wide open in a feral roar, sharp fangs bared, and its bladed wings cut through the air as it hurtled toward its target with deadly intent. The blurred cityscape behind it made its speed and ferocity even more terrifying. The monstrous hornet lunged forward with blinding speed, but suddenly a brilliant sphere of blue energy comes towards it. The intense light illuminated its snarling jaws and menacing stinger. Moments before the inevitable impact, number 17 extended his gloved hand toward the incoming force, blue energy swirling violently at his command. Sparks of flame danced along his arm, and the ground beneath his feet cracked and splintered from the sheer power radiating outward. The woman, clutching a young girl tightly in her arms, looked up with a relieved smile. Her voice trembled with emotion as she said, "Thank you for saving me." The fear in her eyes was slowly replaced by gratitude, while the child held on to her quietly, still wary of their surroundings. One of the uniformed men, his shoulders heavy with guilt, looked at the number 17 and said, "I'm sorry to put such a burden on a child like you." Number 17, his face calm and voice steady, simply replied, "It's fine." The scene shifted to a pair of sturdy black boots stepping onto the cracked ground, the words, 59 years ago, marking the moment. Number 17 stood in the middle of a ruined battlefield, surrounded by shattered debris, the severed limbs of monstrous creatures, and craters embedded in the ground. His mind felt clouded, his thoughts fragmented. Why am I here? The question echoed in his head as he struggled to recall anything. What was I doing just now? He wondered, staring blankly at the carnage around him, as if a crucial piece of his memory had just slipped away. From behind, a man in a white lab coat with round glasses called out, "Oh, number 17, why did you stop?" There was a faint, almost mocking curiosity in his tone as he added, "Did your memory get confused?" His calm demeanor contrasted sharply with the chaotic battlefield around them. The man in the white lab coat threw his arms wide, his face lit with unsettling excitement. "Your side effects have finally begun," he declared, almost gleefully. Standing a short distance away, number 17 stared at him in confusion. His thoughts clouded. "Side effects?" he echoed silently, unsure of what the scientist meant. The man in the lab coat carefully documented his observations, noting, "As a result of implanting over 500 types of monster cells for 15 years, 54 years ago, deep within a secret laboratory, relentless experiments took place. The result was extraordinary, a being with power beyond measure, possessing at least an S-rank hunter classification, his true strength practically incalculable. Now, bound in heavy chains and drenched in blood, Number 17 sat restrained in a chair, his monstrous aura radiating in the dim light. The scientist, unable to hide his manic pride, declared him the lab's greatest success. 20 years ago, a gloved hand held out a piece of raw meat, the gesture deliberate and coaxing. "All right, number 17, good boy," the voice called out softly, as if speaking to something dangerous that needed careful handling. The young woman flinched back in shock as a large bird-like creature with sharp features and blazing orange eyes lunged toward her. "Whoa!" she exclaimed, instinctively stepping away from the sudden, aggressive movement. The woman crouched a short distance away, smiling in satisfaction. "See? I told you it would eat," she said, watching the creature tear into its meal. This monster was number 17, nearby. A mother turned away in disgust. "It's gross." A man gently covered his young son's eyes. "Don't look at things like that," he said firmly. 3 days ago, a blinding surge of energy erupted in the air, splitting the sky with crackling light. Number 17's golden eyes widened, reflecting the storm of power as arcs of electricity danced violently around it. Massive, grotesque number 17 let out a final haunting roar as its body began to dissolve into fragments of light. Its fading voice echoed through the air, repeating in a broken mechanical tone, "All missions complete." As the sun dipped low on the horizon, its golden rays illuminated a vast, jagged chasm that tore through the barren land. The ground was littered with bones and remnants of the fallen, a silent testament to the devastation that had unfolded here. A haunting wind whispered through the canyon, carrying with it the echoes of battles long past. Amid the desolate expanse, a single weathered bone lay half buried in the dust. The bone shifted suddenly, scraping against the dry earth as if stirred by an unseen force. In an instant, with a blinding pillar of light, that bone erupted from the ground, tearing through the darkness and piercing the sky. A massive spinal column, brimming with crackling energy, shot up from the earth, each segment pulsing with unnatural vitality. The narration echoed ominously. This was no ordinary relic. It carried within it the combined power of 527 different types of monster cells, a grotesque fusion of countless creatures' strengths. Its skeletal frame continued to assemble, ribs locking into place around a dark, pulsating core. This abomination was no mere monster, but Chimera Hunter number 17, a weapon forged from the cells of hundreds of deadly beasts, reborn for one purpose alone. From its spine and ribs, sinewy cords of muscle began weaving into place, twisting and binding together with unnatural speed. The once lifeless bones pulsed with grotesque vitality, each fiber brimming with monstrous power as the creature's body took shape. A blinding explosion erupted, flooding the darkness with searing light. Then bare feet touched down softly on the cracked ground, the air around them still hazy with lingering smoke from the explosion. He looked down at his hands in disbelief, his voice trembling. What is this? The unfamiliar warmth of flesh replacing what he had once been. A haze of confusion filled his mind as he took in his transformed body. Human again now? He asked himself, the words barely more than a whisper. Bathed in the warm glow of the rising sun, he stood at the center of the barren land, his shadow stretching long across the cracked earth. The massive stone arch framed the light behind him, as if the world itself was announcing his return. Revival. The man stood there, looking down at himself in disbelief. His voice trembled as he wondered if he had truly returned to being human again. He looked at his hand, noticing the monstrous claws that had formed. Although he appeared human, he realized that the monster cells within him still remained, meaning he couldn't truly call himself human. Reflecting on the situation, he thought that a lot of time must have passed, and since the lab hadn't come to retrieve him, something unusual was going on. He realized he had been discarded. The experimental number once engraved on his wrist had vanished as well. Looking at his hand, he wondered if this meant he was finally free, no longer bound to the lab or its control. Thinking about the nature of this power, he concluded that such a transformation could only belong to an immortal type ability. He understood the nature of the ability. It allowed the body to revive up to 3 times, as long as its core remained intact and wasn't destroyed. He recalled how it was believed that human and immortal cells could never fuse. Yet, looking at himself now, he realized that his body had fully recovered, restored to its peak condition. He realized that with all the side effects of the experiment gone, his condition had reached its best state. The constant haze that clouded his mind since the beginning had finally lifted. Even the spells engraved on him to prevent escape or rebellion had completely disappeared. He thought to himself that if his existence as experiment number 17 had truly ended, then perhaps it was finally time for him to live a normal life, as a human. He reflected that number 17 was nothing more than a label forced on him by the lab. His true identity had been buried beneath that number. He remembered someone once telling him that while he might seem rough or even unstable, he should strive to live with purpose, by consciously helping others. He recalled the words spoken to him. If he could live a life helping countless others, that would give him true purpose. And in that moment, his original name came back to him, Cheon Do-woon. He scoffed at the idea, calling it nonsense. To him, the thought of helping others felt meaningless. After all, how could an orphan who grew up in the slums possibly be capable of saving anyone else? It didn't make sense. He stood at the edge of the cliff, staring into the vast horizon as the sun set. With his thoughts heavy, he questioned what path he should take now. The idea of revenge echoed in his mind, tempting him as a possible answer. He realized that revenge wasn't something he could pursue blindly. It required a clear target standing before him, someone to focus that rage upon. He admitted to himself that the events which had once fueled his hatred now felt so distant that his desire for revenge no longer burned as fiercely. Besides, there was no way for him to return to the human world at this moment. He decided that if he lived long enough, he would eventually cross paths with them again. For now, he pushed the thought aside, telling himself he would deal with it when the time came. He narrowed his eyes, his gaze firm and focused as he looked down on his lower body. He stood tall, his back to the setting sun as its light shone through him, casting a powerful silhouette. In silence, he faced the horizon, lost in thought about the uncertain path ahead. At last, he made his choice. For the time being, he decided to set everything else aside and try living, at least a little, like a human. As he took his first steps forward, a simple but important thought crossed his mind. If he was going to live like a human, the first thing he needed was clothes. As he walked across the barren land, he wondered to himself, when was the last time he had even worn clothes? The thought felt distant, almost foreign, after everything he had been through. As he wandered near the shimmering lake, he wondered what material he could possibly use to make clothes. The thought lingered in his mind. Whatever it was, it would need to be tough enough to last. Peeking through the bushes, he considered his next step. Perhaps it was best to look around the area for something useful, anything that could serve as material for clothes. As he searched, something caught his attention. With a curious look, he leaned closer and muttered, This is... He came across the fallen body of a large beast. Observing its state, he wondered if it had died in a territorial dispute. Judging by the lack of major injuries, he concluded that it must have been an exceptionally strong creature. Looking closer at the creature, he realized the truth. It hadn't fallen in battle. Instead, it must have died from poison. He smirked with satisfaction and raised his hand. Good, he muttered, relieved. It was perfect timing. Just when he needed leather. Without hesitation, he drew his blade. As sparks of energy flashed, his hand turned into a blade. This was another creature's power he got. Holding the curved blade firmly, he muttered with a faint smile, I guess I'll need a blade to make it easier, right? He recalled the lessons he had learned back at the lab. First, cut the belly straight, then make incisions along the limbs, right? He muttered to himself, visualizing the steps in his mind. With a determined look, he nodded to himself and said, Okay, let's try it. As he pressed the blade down, blood unexpectedly seeped out, making his eyes widen in shock, and the next second, his body was suddenly enveloped in a surge of dark gas that comes out of that bird's body. Eyes narrowing, he muttered in disbelief. This is... The air around him twisted violently as a sinister miasma spread out. His eyes widened in realization. Poisonous aura. The ground darkened, trees withered, and even the fallen beast nearby convulsed under the suffocating energy. Despite the poisonous aura swirling violently around him, his body remained completely unharmed, no damage. Glancing at the faint stench in the air, he muttered calmly, It smells. I'll have to wash it. After finishing his task, he looked at his handiwork with satisfaction. It's done. Not bad for a first try, is it? He remarked proudly. Then, without hesitation, he turned his gaze forward and muttered, Next. He stepped into the clear stream, the cool water rippling around his hand as bubbles rose to the surface with each movement. After cleaning it, he examined the hide in his hand, puzzled. It looked soft when I saw it, he muttered, tugging at the material. But as he tested its texture, he frowned. Is it because it's monster hide? It's too stiff. It's not like it's a metal plate or something. His eyes widened as an idea suddenly struck him, a spark of realization lighting up his expression. "Oh, in times like this," he exclaimed, clearly having thought of a solution. Without hesitation, he slammed his fists down on the monster hide repeatedly, using brute force to soften and shape it. The ground shook with each powerful strike. Panting slightly, he glanced at his work and muttered, "Is this how you tanned?" He wasn't entirely sure of the process, but reasoning aloud, he added, "Well, it must be, right?" He lifted the processed hide in his hands, giving it a gentle shake. A bright smile spread across his face as he thought, "Oh, it's done. It's soft." The once stiff monster hide had transformed into a smooth, pliable material, just as he had hoped. He nodded in satisfaction, holding the tanned hide. "Good," he murmured. "The size should be roughly this, right?" Everything seemed to be coming together just as he had envisioned. Just then, the bird beast which he just skinned, a small fire awaked on it, showing that it's alive. After cutting the hide roughly to size, he held it up with determination. But then, the fiery creature unexpectedly emerged from the ground, glaring at him with a fierce intensity. He didn't notice that, and with a burst of strength, he clenched his fist tightly around the pelt, the force radiating outward as the fabric tore under the pressure, showing his sheer determination. He slipped the hide into place, adjusting it around his body with a firm pull. Looking at the result, he smirked slightly and muttered, "Not bad," clearly satisfied with his handiwork. Standing tall under the clear blue sky, he admired his handiwork. The rough makeshift garment clung snugly to his frame as he tightened the belt around his waist. With a satisfied smile, he declared, "It fits my body perfectly." As he adjusted his rough new clothing, he noticed a strange sensation in his shoulder. Pulling the fabric aside, his eyes narrowed at the sight of a dark purple mark spreading faintly across his skin. Examining it closely, his expression turned serious as he realized, the poison hasn't fully drained. He let out a thoughtful hum, knowing this was something he couldn't ignore. As he sighed in annoyance, deciding to just wear his makeshift clothes despite the discomfort, a strange sound caught his attention. Startled, he turned toward the source and froze. By the water's edge, the creature he thought was long dead suddenly stirred, flames flickering weakly from its head. With a puzzled look, he muttered, "What? Wasn't it dead?" The creature suddenly gasped and choked, its twin flaming heads twitching as if in distress. Despite its weak state, it seemed to react to his presence, almost as though it could understand him. Observing the strange creature struggling yet still alive, he stroked his chin thoughtfully. "Seeing that it's alive despite having rigor mortis," he muttered, narrowing his eyes. "This one must be an immortal type too." He looked at the struggling creature, its flames flickering weakly. "If it were before, I would have killed it without hesitation, because I was a hunter. But now, as he studied it more closely, he realized, the opponent is already weakened, and not even a threat. There's no need to kill it." He looked at the weakened creature and smiled softly. "You and I are both lucky. Since it's our second life, let's live well." As he turned and walked away, he glanced back one last time. "If fate allows, we'll meet again somewhere," he said calmly. The weakened creature lay in silence, its fiery gaze following him as he disappeared into the distance. Bare footsteps echoed softly against the rocky ground as he slowly emerged from the shadows, each step carrying an eerie weight in the silence. Now that he had managed to take care of his clothes, he walked forward with determination. What he needed next was clear. "I need a house," he thought, already planning his next step for survival. Suddenly the ground beneath him began to crack, faint sparks flickering out as the stones split apart. Something was about to emerge from below. With a deafening screech, a colossal centipede-like monster burst forth, its sharp mandibles snapping and its many legs clawing at the ground. The man stood calmly, hands folded behind his back, staring up at the towering creature without a hint of fear. The monstrous centipede loomed high above, its razor-sharp claws glinting menacingly as it prepared to strike. From below, the man stood firm, gazing up at the towering beast with unwavering calm, his posture unshaken despite the terrifying sight. The young man looked up at the towering creature with calm eyes, tilting his head slightly as he asked, almost casually, "Is it too dark here?" With a single sweeping motion of his arm, the young man unleashed a devastating strike. A sharp arc of force ripped through the air, slicing cleanly across the monstrous centipede's body. Green blood sprayed wildly as the beast screeched in agony, its massive form reeling back under the overwhelming power of his attack. The young man calmly turned his back. With his hands folded neatly behind him, he walked toward the light at the end of the tunnel. His voice was cold and indifferent as he dismissed the fallen creature with just one word: rejected. Then he went to a snowy mountain. A cold wind swept across the mountains, carrying with it a relentless flurry of snow. Their large, white-furred beast with a blue face lay in the snow, its mouth wide open in a cry filled with sharp fangs. Snowflakes fell around it as it struggled. Our MC walked past the fallen snow beasts lying across the ground. Looking at the desolate, frozen land around him, he thought to himself that it would be difficult to find any food in such a place. So this place was also rejected. He then walked through the dense forest, and suddenly he wrinkled his nose in disgust. The foul odor in the air made him frown, and he muttered to himself about how unbearable the smell was. This was also rejected. He then stepped into a dark cave. Noticing the damp walls and the sticky green liquid dripping down from above, the air felt heavy and wet, making him frown in discomfort as he muttered to himself that the place was far too humid. This was also rejected. He left the damp cave behind, only to step into another place where streams of lava glowed brightly. The intense heat pressed against him, and with a weary sigh, he muttered that it was unbearably hot. He also rejected it. Stepping out into the open, he was met with a clear blue sky and warm sunlight pouring down. Standing tall on the edge of a rocky cliff, he looked around in surprise and quietly muttered, "Oh," as the brightness washed over him. Standing atop the cliff, he gazed at the breathtaking sight before him. Lush greenery, cascading waterfalls, and a rainbow shimmering in the sunlight. With a hint of surprise, he admitted to himself that the scenery was quite impressive. He never thought he would one day find the demon realm beautiful. Looking out at the peaceful scenery, he wondered aloud if he should explore further. Without hesitation, he leapt gracefully from the cliffside, ready to look around a bit more. He landed with force, the ground cracking beneath him as dust and debris scattered. The impact shook the earth, showing the sheer strength behind his leap. He stood by the water's edge, gazing down at the clear surface. Beneath the gentle ripples, schools of fish swam freely. Observing the scene, he noted that the water was clean and full of life, with plenty of fish to be found. From beneath the surface, sharp-toothed fish lunged upward with menacing glares, their jaws wide open. Watching them, he thought they looked quite delicious. He imagined that if he caught one and roasted it on the spot, it would feel just like camping. He rubbed his chin thoughtfully, imagining a simple life by the water. With the abundance of fish acting as a natural food source, he pictured himself building a small house, sitting outside by a campfire, and living peacefully in the area. As he walked further, his eyes caught sight of bright yellow flowers blooming under the clear sky. As he continued walking, he noticed the fresh scent carried by the breeze. Standing among the tall trees with sunlight filtering gently through the leaves, he took a deep breath of the fresh air. Surrounded by flowers and greenery, he felt a sense of peace, and simply thought to himself, "Good." With a calm smile, he looked up at the sunlight streaming through the leaves above. Feeling at peace, he softly envisioned the name for his future home, Cheon Do-woon House. As leaves gently rustled down from the trees, a single word seemed to echo through the air: approved. At the same time, in that dungeon beneath the wide blue sky, leaves drifted gently across the open plains. The land stretched far into the distance, with mountains rising faintly on the horizon, as if marking the beginning of a new journey. Suddenly, cracks began to spread across the space. The cracks in the space split wide open, releasing a blinding blue light. In an instant, a swirling vortex appeared, twisting violently as if tearing through space itself, ready to connect this land to another realm. With a thunderous crash, something comes out of the vortex and slammed into the ground, scattering dirt and debris in every direction. From within the smoke and dust, a dark figure emerged. Sparks of red energy crackled around its body, and its heavy steps pressed into the ground. Through the smoke and glowing embers, a robot-like figure appeared, its eyes burning a deep, menacing red. Sparks of energy flickered across its body as it looked around, its mechanical voice echoing with a question. "This is the demon realm." On the other hand, our MC clenched his fist, determination shining in his eyes. He told himself that the first step would be finding a proper site to build his house, setting the foundation for the life he envisioned. With a powerful motion, golden energy burst forth from his hand, arcing through the air. It shot downward like a blazing streak of light, slamming into the forest below with explosive force, marking the spot where he intended to build his home. The golden energy struck the forest floor with blinding force, instantly slicing through the massive trees. MC surveyed the fallen trees and the cleared land with a nod of satisfaction. "This much for the site should be enough," he murmured, acknowledging that the space was now ready to begin the next stage of construction. With a wave of his hand, the logs floated up, bound by glowing strands of energy. He carefully separated the sturdy, well-preserved trees from the rest. MC stood with his arms crossed, gazing at the neatly stacked logs. "This many trees should be enough," he muttered thoughtfully. Then his eyes shifted to the stumps scattered across the clearing, a slight frown crossing his face. "Is the floor too uneven?" he wondered, already considering the next step in preparing the site. MC gripped tightly and pulled with all his strength. In an instant, the ground erupted with a thunderous crack as roots and earth were torn apart. Splinters, soil, and leaves burst into the air, the sheer force of his action flattening the uneven land beneath him. He looked over the vast cleared land, satisfied with the result of his effort. The once uneven ground was now leveled, open to the sky. He pressed his hand firmly against the wooden surface, his thoughts calm and focused. I just moved my hands and feet as my heart guided me, he reflected, allowing instinct to lead the way rather than overthinking. Balancing the massive log on one shoulder, he examined the ground carefully. First, I'll plant pillars at each corner, he muttered. The heavy logs sank into the ground with a solid thud as he planted them firmly in place. What do they call this? Free will? He wondered, a faint smile tugging at his lips. Despite the sweat on his brow, there was a lightness in his heart. Anyway, it's fun. Is it because it's my first time building my own house? He thought, feeling an unfamiliar sense of satisfaction. He moved quickly, almost like a blur, placing one plank after another with steady precision, straightening the base of the structure. Step by step, the house was beginning to take shape. He examined the sticky green substance oozing in his hand, its slimy texture bubbling faintly. Building walls, he muttered. Since there were no nails to use, he had to improvise. With a firm nod, he decided, I'll use snail-type monster mucus instead. He carefully pressed the logs together, using the thick green mucus as adhesive. Once it hardens, he thought, it'll be as solid as rock. A faint smile crossed his face as he added, waterproofing, in a way, as the bright sky, golden rays spilling down as the leaves rustled gently in the breeze. Now, for the finishing touches, he murmured, ready to complete his work. He looked up with a satisfied smile, hands resting on his hips as the sunlight shone down on him. Good, he said confidently. Most monsters won't even dare to approach. MC stood proudly in front of the small wooden hut, its walls reinforced with snail-type monster mucus, and decorated with silkworm larva's cocoon silk. Despite its unusual construction, he smiled with satisfaction. Quite cozy. I like it, he said, clearly pleased with his work. He stood in thought as he examined his work. But it's a bit lacking, he muttered to himself, a slight frown forming. It felt like something was missing, though he couldn't immediately put his finger on what it was. He pondered to himself, what was a normal human house like? His mind drifted back to a memory of a classroom. A teacher stood at the front, pointing to a projection on the screen. See, this is what a regular house looked like before the gate opened, the teacher explained. As the students watched an image of an ordinary home with people and a dog in the yard, he recalled the images from the educational videos he had seen back at the lab. In those recordings, families often gathered happily in their yards, children laughing, parents smiling, and even pets playing around. He glanced into the distance, watching the empty yard. That said, I can't raise human world dogs in the demon realm, he admitted to himself, realizing the harsh reality of his situation. Kneeling down and pressing his hand against the ground, he muttered to himself, plants? Should I make a vegetable garden? But what can I even plant in the demon realm? His eyes widened in realization, and with a sudden spark of inspiration, something had just come to his mind. He suddenly remembered something important. There was a snowy mountain nearby, he thought, eyes lighting up at the idea. Then, with a spark of excitement, he wondered aloud, should I plant mandragora? As snow whirled fiercely around the towering peak, the mountain shrouded in a relentless blizzard. The icy winds howled as if warning anyone who dared to approach. Mandragora's habitat lies in the deepest, mana-dense peaks of snowy mountains. But our MC trudged barefoot through the icy terrain, snowflakes swirling all around him. He muttered to himself with a shiver. Speaking of which, it's really snowing a lot. As expected of a snowy mountain, snow fell heavily around him as he looked up at the gray sky. A distant memory surfaced. It was snowing this heavily the day I was kidnapped to the lab too, he thought, the bitter recollection weighing on him like the icy flakes settling on his hair and shoulders. The memory replayed vividly in his mind. At that moment, back then, it was so cold he actually thought being kidnapped was a relief. Looking back, there are some good points about becoming a chimera, he thought. Unlike before, when the cold could strip away his life, now he felt none of its bite. Hunger and freezing, once constant threats, were no longer concerns. It was a grim sort of comfort, but a comfort nonetheless. The snowfall began to ease, the once blinding flurry now reduced to drifting flakes that swayed gently in the wind. Anyway, judging by the mana I'm feeling, I must be almost there, he thought. He stopped in his tracks, his gaze falling on the small cluster of vibrant green plants pushing through the snow, their leaves glistening despite the cold. Found it, he muttered with relief. Luckily, It wasn't a wasted trip. MC knows that plants in front of him has fragile nature. Mandragora are sunfish-like monsters, highly vulnerable to stress. They can die from even the smallest environmental changes. MC crouched in the snow, carefully examining the plants. If I'm going to relocate them, I guess younger, more adaptable individuals would be better, right? He muttered to himself. With a measured decision, he concluded, just 3 roots would be enough. As he yanked the mandragora from the ground, the realization struck him immediately. They're going to scream. I should have covered my ears. As he pulled the plant from the ground, instead of a scream, the little mandragora let out a soft sound. The small creature wiggled in his hand, its leafy head swaying and its round body covered in bits of soil. He blinked in surprise and thought, huh? What is this? He carefully pulled out another mandragora. The tiny creature blinked and let out a soft sound. He looked at it in surprise and thought, one more. He stared at the tiny creature in his hand and thought in disbelief, this one too. The little mandragora wriggled loudly, surprising him even more. He looked at the little creatures in disbelief and thought, no way. Are they? The tiny mandragoras wriggled in his hands, making soft noises. Watching them closely, he wondered, are they sleep-talking? It was well known that mandragora scream is actually a phenomenon that happens only when humans artificially cultivate them. It was revealed that in the low-mana human world, when mandragoras are placed under extreme stress, if they are forcibly pulled out, they let out a terrifying scream, and die as a result. MC observed that since this was the demon realm, the mandragoras didn't scream when pulled out. However, what puzzled him was their lack of resistance. At this point, they should have been struggling desperately to escape, yet they remained still. He suddenly realized the reason behind the mandragora's unusual behavior. Instead of resisting, they seemed to recognize him as kin. Because mandragora cells had also been implanted in his body, he calmly tucked the small mandragoras away, relieved by how easily they accepted him. With a faint smile, he thought that this worked out well. After all, it was better for them if they felt less stressed. MC began to imagine the possibilities for the future. Once the mandragoras had grown well, he thought, perhaps he could ask them for a few root tendrils to brew tea, or even enjoy their fruits as snacks. The thought made him smile as he pictured it vividly. He suddenly recalled an important fact. If the mandragora fruit was forcibly picked, it would become extremely poisonous. Realizing this, he concluded that he would have to persuade them kindly instead of trying to take it by force. MC stood on the snowy cliffside, his eyes narrowing as he listened carefully. From the distance, faint cries echoed through the mountains. It seems there are hunters nearby, he muttered. Though uncertain of their purpose, he couldn't understand why anyone would risk venturing into such a dangerous snowy mountain. He smirked with a confident glint in his eyes. Turning slightly, he asked aloud, almost playfully, shall I go grab some gatestone quickly? On the other hand, 2 men were fighting something. One of the men clenched his teeth in fury, shouting, damn it, to use us as bait and run off. His companion, gripping his weapon tightly, snapped back with urgency. They're coming again. The tension in their voices revealed just how dire their situation had become. From the darkness of the snowy forest, monstrous creatures lunged down upon the hunters with terrifying speed. The 2 men on the ground braced themselves, weapons raised, but the overwhelming number of beasts was too much. A monstrous snow beast lunged forward, its gaping jaws splitting unnaturally wide. Inside its maw, rows of razor-sharp fangs glistened, but what was even more horrifying were the writhing, fleshy tentacles that extended from its throat. The hunters were now face to face with a nightmare far beyond their imagination. One man thrust his hand forward, summoning a glowing blue barrier that blocked the charging beasts. The creatures slammed into the shield with force, but he gritted his teeth and held on, straining under the impact. Sweat ran down that man's face as he gritted his teeth, his expression filled with strain and fear. His strength was failing, and with a trembling voice he muttered, no good. Cracks began to spread across the barrier, glowing faintly under the pressure. His hands trembled with effort as he realized in fear, the barrier will break soon. The cracks in the glowing barrier spread rapidly as the man's strength faltered. Beads of sweat rolled down his face while regret filled his thoughts. He cursed himself silently. I should have just stuck to odd jobs. Why did I even volunteer to find the chimera? The barrier finally shattered into glowing shards, scattering into the air. The man screamed in pure desperation, his voice cracking, help! As monstrous beasts lunged toward him. Just then a light shined in the sky. It crashed down from the sky, followed by a deafening explosion. The ground erupted, blasting dirt and stone into the air as shockwaves tore through the battlefield. The monsters, feral rabbit-like beasts with bloodthirsty eyes, snarled and growled, surrounding the 2 men trapped in the chaos. One soldier, barely able to stay on his feet, trembled as he raised his gun, while the other sat on the snow, wide-eyed and frozen in terror. His voice cracked as he stammered, "What is that?" From within the swirling smoke, an ominous silhouette slowly began to emerge. Through the thick smoke, the soldiers squinted their eyes in shock. One of them stammered in disbelief, realizing the dark silhouette was not a beast, but a human figure slowly emerging from the haze. Out of the dust and smoke, an RMC finally appeared. His face was calm and unreadable, his silence carrying more weight than words as he stood there. He narrowed his eyes at the creature before him. It looked like a snow rabbit, but its fierce glare and sharp fangs revealed it was anything but ordinary. But the snow rabbits froze in place, as an ominous presence loomed above the MC. He released his killing instinct, and a massive, shadowy figure with glowing eyes appeared, its terrifying aura filling the air. The snow rabbits screamed in terror, their cries echoing through the frozen forest. Panic spread among them as they leapt and scattered in every direction, desperately trying to escape. The two hunters stared in shock, disbelief written across their faces. One clutched his wounded arm, his voice trembling said, "It's impossible. A B-class monster, running away as soon as it sees him." In the quiet moment that followed, one hunter expressed gratitude, saying how thankful they were for being saved. One of the hunter introduced himself as Kim Tae-hoon, and pointed to his companion, Oh Seong-ju. With a respectful tone, he asked MC for his name. MC calmly replied that he is Cheon Do-woon. Kim Tae-hoon's mind raced as he studied the MC before him. Cheon Do-woon? I've never heard that name before, he thought. The MC's ragged outfit only deepened his suspicion. What's with those clothes? Could he be a reclusive hunter? MC couldn't help but question. Why are they here? From their appearance, they clearly seemed like a D-class hunter. There was no way they didn't know how dangerous the snowy mountain was. One hunter hesitated before replying that this is because of money. They told MC that a request had been issued to capture a chimera alive. The reward offered was said to be substantial. Hearing this, MC's eyes sharpened as he muttered softly to himself, "A chimera." One of the hunter explained with a laugh that a test subject had escaped from the lab. It was said to be some kind of machine creature, and while fleeing, it supposedly jumped into a gate. Hearing this, MC thought to himself with relief, if it's a machine creature, then they're not looking for me. MC made up his mind, thinking to himself, I should grab the gate stone and go. MC then questioned suspiciously, but where are your bags? You didn't come to the demon realm empty-handed, did you? The gate stone. One of the hunter quickly made up an excuse, stammering. Those team members, those guys took everything and ran off. Clutching his wounded shoulder, the man gritted his teeth and shouted, they intended that from the start. Inwardly, he regretted not realizing it sooner, thinking, I should have noticed when that B-class hunter offered to let me join. Those traitorous hunters laughed and fled, leaving monsters in their wake. Hearing that MC thought to himself, then the gate stone is with them. The nervous hunters, their bodies trembling from exhaustion, pleaded with MC. Don't you have any plans to return? We're almost at our limit, you see. One stammered desperately. The other added, you know well what happens when you're contaminated by mana, don't you? They looked at him with a mix of fear and urgency, hoping for mercy. Well, the time a hunter could endure in Demon Realm varied greatly depending on their awakening grade. If they failed to return to the human world in time to purify the mana within them, most would inevitably die. But there was one anomaly. Our MC was the exception. Both of the hunters' desperate voices echoed. One asks that, can't he please take them to the human world, adding that his pregnant wife is at home. But MC wasn't listening to them, and was using his powers to search the other hunters. Found them, he muttered, locking onto his targets with unwavering focus. The desperate plea of the hunters was suddenly cut short. With a thunderous burst, MC shot forward with terrifying speed, the force leaving a deep crater behind. The two hunters froze, wide-eyed, as Cheon Do-woon suddenly leapt into the sky with incredible speed. The hunters panicked and shouted after him. Mr. Cheon Do-woon? One of them cried out in shock. Where are you going? The other yelled, their voices filled with confusion and desperation. On the other hand, the little robot was running away, its glowing eyes fixed on the bright streak. It didn't say a word, only a quiet pause, as if processing everything it had just witnessed. The little robot reached at the edge of the snowy cliff, its small footprints trailing behind it. From above, it gazed down at the dark, thorn-filled forest below. Snow fell gently, but the eerie sight of the twisting shadows made it cautious. The robot quietly noted to itself that this place seemed very dangerous. From behind, a group of hunters spotted the small robot standing ahead on the snowy cliff. Seizing the moment, one of them shouted that this was their chance, and urged everyone to capture it quickly. Without hesitation, they all charged forward, shields and weapons ready. The small robot turned its head slightly, its glowing eyes steady as faint sparks lit up around its frame. In a calm yet ominous tone, it muttered, "Dangerous things." The robot's transformation was sudden. Its once warm yellow eyes now burned with a sinister red glow. Crimson sparks and violent energy crackled around its body, as its form shifted into a darker, more menacing version of itself. The robot system activated, its cold voice echoing just one command. Its only purpose now was clear: to eliminate everything in its path. 4 warriors attacked the robot together. One leapt from above with a shield in hand. Another swung down with a glowing purple sword. A woman surrounded by a magical aura rushed forward, while a man with a heavy blade slashed fiercely from the ground. The robot, its body shining with red energy, raised its arm to defend against their combined assault as the battle exploded around them. Sometimes later, our MC arrived at that place. He looked ahead with surprise. In a worried voice, he wondered if he had arrived just a little too late. He walked across the blood-stained snow, noticing the abandoned gear scattered around. From the scene and a return stone floating in air, he realized that all the hunters had already run away. The hunters had even left behind their luggage in their rush to escape. On the ground, mixed among the bloodstains, were both small childlike footprints and the tracks of animals. Seeing that, MC wondered if the creature had been fighting those hunters while changing its form. He remembered those hunters telling him that an experimental subject had escaped from the lab. It was a mechanical creature, and during its escape, it transformed and jumped into a gate before vanishing. The creature was created from liquid metal, allowing it to freely change its shape. However, since the material was rare, it was made small, about the size of a child or a large dog. MC thought about the mechanical creature. The fact that it managed to overpower 5 B-rank hunters all on its own was truly impressive. On the other hand, Kim Yao urgently called out, telling Xiongju to snap out of it. Xiongju, weak and trembling, said he is done for, explaining that his whole body was contaminated with demonic energy. Kim Yao refused to accept it, shouting at him not to talk nonsense, and reminding him that his child was going to be born next month. With blood dripping from his mouth, Xiongju weakly begged Kim Yao to tell his wife that he was sorry. Tears streamed down his Kim Yao's face as he cried out desperately, pleading with Xiongju to hold on just a little longer. As despair filled the air, Kim Yao questioned if miracles truly existed. At that moment, a glowing figure stepped forward, their foot touching the ground like a sign of hope breaking through the darkness. Tears still streaming down Kim Yao's face, his eyes widened in shock as a sudden radiant light appeared before him. As the golden light cleared, the Kim Yao's eyes widened in disbelief. Standing before them was Cheon Do-woon, carrying a huge pack on his back. They were stunned to see that the pack he carried was their missing luggage. Immediately, Kim Yao rushed forward, going towards Cheon Do. He dropped to his knees in desperation, his voice trembling as he pleaded. He begged Cheon Do-woon to save them, his cries echoing through the snowy forest. Cheon Do-woon stood there surprised to see him. Kim Yao said he knew that in the lawless demon realm, once it's taken, it's over. So he fell to his knees, and takes out money with trembling hands, explaining that he and Seong-su had brought 2 checks worth 10 million won each, calling it the value of their lives. With desperation in his voice, he pleaded, begging to buy just 1 gate stone. Kim Yao's words echoed. He told MC that if they didn't return now, death was certain. Cheon Do-woon's eyes shifted to the checks trembling in the man's hands. 20 million won? He muttered, his expression unreadable. Cheon Do-woon thought to himself that he couldn't use the money right now, but it would definitely be useful once he went to the human world later. So Cheon Do-woon takes out a gate stone and broke it, releasing its energy. Kim Yao bowed deeply, holding on to Cheon Do-woon's hand with gratitude as the glowing return portal swirled behind them. With a trembling voice, he said that he would never forget this favor for the rest of his life. As chaos unfolded around him, Cheon Do-woon quietly looked at the stack of money in his hand, his face calm and unreadable. While Kim Yao turned to Xiongju, asking him to get up quickly, saying if they go fast, they might live. But before they leave, Cheon Do-woon asked them if a gate stone cost around 200,000 won in the human world. Kim Yao, supporting injured Xiongju, looked puzzled, and replied that gate stones now cost about 1 million won, and questioned why Cheon Do-woon was asking. Hearing that, Cheon Do-woon extended his hand towards Xiongju, and grabbed his shoulder, saying, "It just feels like he received too much." Cheon Do-woon smiled as faint blue energy starts swirling around his fingers. With a calm tone, he told them that he would give them something else as change instead. Just as he said that, a surge of bright blue energy erupted around Cheon Do-woon, swirling like flames and shaking the air. Both of the hunters stared at him in shock. Blue flames of mana swirled violently in the air as Cheon Dawoon released his power. Kim Yao realized that Cheon Dawoon is injecting mana, covering his face from the overwhelming energy. He shouted, asking him Cheon Dawoon to wait, because he knows that injecting mana was an act so dangerous that even A-rank hunters avoided it. If the flow of mana clashed and became tangled, the mana core could shatter, causing both individuals to die instantly. The danger was clear. Kim Yao knows that if this continued any longer, both of them would undoubtedly perish. But as the mana flow stopped, Xiongju looked down at his hands in shock. A warm glow surrounded him as he realized what had happened. The demonic energy within him had been completely purified. In excitement, he hugged Kim Yao, whose eyes wide with shock and relief. Xiongju cried out with joy, shouting that they were alive. Both of them had survived. But deep down, Kim Yao still struggled to believe it, whispering to himself that such a thing should have been impossible. As Cheon Dawoon turned to leave, Xiongju behind him dropped to his knees in gratitude. He thanked him with teary eyes, swearing never to forget the favor. While Kim Yao could hardly believe what had just happened, Cheon Dawoon had purified demonic energy by injecting mana, something thought to be impossible without an overwhelming amount of power. After witnessing the impossible, a single thought echoed in their minds: just who exactly is Mr. Cheon Dawoon? On the other hand, Cheon Dawoon walked steadily with a large pack strapped to his back. His expression was calm as he let out a thoughtful hum,